Let me preface what I'm about to go into by saying this. The games of Hideo Kojima have changed my life. If you asked me to list my favourite games of all time, a good number of them would be Metal Gear titles. Sons of Liberty, in my opinion, is maybe the best game ever made, and even when his games have problems, I still respect them. Long story short, I say all of this as a fan, and I hope that all of this is taken in the non-confrontational manner I intend. It's just, man, I watched that Connecting Worlds documentary that recently got released on Disney+, and it helped solidify some thoughts I've had on the man's career trajectory of late. Or, at the very least, the ways in which the idea of Hideo Kojima is presented to the world. His continued and seemingly growing desire to cozy up to the film industry, and importantly, what effect this might have on his games going forward. This documentary, which is made by Glenn Milner I should say, not Kojima, is, well, to say it's nothingy would honestly be kind of generous. It's posited as a look into the making of Death Stranding, the tumultuous period of Kojima's life that it represented, a real look at the man behind the game. And we look at him, alright, through plenty of shots of the man walking, close-ups of him staring pensively into the distance, as we get a string of his film buddies and Jeff Keighley talking vaguely about the importance of telling stories and following your creative impulses, seemingly because the guy that made Mad Max doesn't really know enough about games to say much else of substance. There's nothing about the infamously acrimonious departure from Konami that arguably kicked this whole thing off. Any behind-the-scenes stuff is just Kojima telling people to change this or that small feature, all while Hollywood actors try to find any other words with which to say they had no idea what was going on in this game. Similarly, I don't know what went into the creative process here, but I struggle to figure out who this documentary is really for. I guess, ultimately, it's for Kojima, a man who has frequently weathered the sometimes unfair criticism that he wants to make movies rather than games, but who has also increasingly extolled the virtues of indie films of late, distributors of distinctly indie-looking films such as A24. He's now got that very company working on an adaptation of Death Stranding, a game in which he was able to rope in every celebrity imaginable, and now he gets to be the star of his own indie-looking film, with all the visual cliches that entails, in which his film industry pals tell him how good he is, and he gets the big premiere at Tribeca. But that's the issue. At the end of the day, it's only just skin deep. And look, this might have nothing to do with the actual documentary itself, but it is still something I couldn't help but pick up on. You know, the thing that ended up saying the most to me was during the intro, when subtitles would show the names of his film buddies as they were speaking. Refn, Miller, Del Toro, etc. But then up pops Tetsuya Mitsuguchi, an absolutely legendary figure within games, one of the only games industry people featured that isn't also directly employed by Kojima, and he's simply labelled video game designer. And what's interesting to me about this is that for a brief moment, you get the hint of someone actually touching on an interesting point, with Mitsuguchi stating that Kojima always seems like he's fighting against something, maybe himself, or Shinji Mikami poking just the slightest bit of fun, as he says with a smirk that Kojima's games clearly show a man obsessed with film. These are people that know Kojima's industry, and as such, it's the closest thing we get to anything resembling informed, incisive critique, or just an interesting angle from which to interrogate the documentary's subject, that is nonetheless swiftly moved on from. Gotta get back to the well-known Hollywood people spouting meaningless platitudes, I suppose. It's a similar frustration I've found with Kojima's other non-game work as well. A year or so back, I bought a copy of his recent book, The Creative Gene, a series of essays and interviews compiled over many years, focusing on how various media has influenced the infamously intertextual works of what many people describe as perhaps video games' most recognisable auteur. Seems like a pretty interesting concept for a book, right? Well, reading through it, I became pretty staggered as to how little was actually said. Early on, there's a whole lot of stuff about buying books and going into bookstores and how he walks past some books and doesn't walk past other books, and that recognizing when he does either of those things makes him better at finding books he likes, and how you shouldn't feel bad if you don't like a book, and just on and on. But then you get to a random excerpt where all this fluff suddenly gives way to a story in which Hideo takes his son to a baseball game, and for a couple of beautifully terse paragraphs, he elucidates his worries as a father, and the almost inevitable distance that will grow between him and his then adolescent child as he ages. How, as a human being, Kojima is entering unknown territory here. My father passed away when I was 13. I have no memory of going through adolescence with a dad. How do I approach my son in the spring of his adulthood? I don't have the slightest clue. It scares him. And the rawness of this passage honestly hit me like a ton of bricks. Despite being obsessed with this dude's games for so many years, this is maybe the most overtly personal I've ever heard Kojima get. It helped me contextualize the very direct ways in which media, in this case a Robert B. Parker novel, affects his moment-to-moment thinking, as well as his approach to games, characters that wouldn't be written until years after this essay was conceived. And then it's right back to paragraph upon paragraph of plot description for different books he likes, where thanks to what I presume are translation issues, lines that should read like "it was a real page turner" or "you just can't put the book down" becomes the far drier, less evocative, essentially when the events of the book happen, quote, "the reader keeps turning the pages." My point here is that this man has clearly led an unbelievably rich life, and yet through an entire documentary, dozens of essays and interviews across hundreds of pages, I feel like I only ever occasionally got the slightest peek at anything beyond the absolute surface level. I don't know the man or how he himself wants to be seen. It's just hard for me to shake the feeling, with the way that this personality has been cultivated and presented to the public, that his desire to appear vaguely indie or artistic has begun to trump saying much of actual substance. Most importantly though, it makes me wonder about the future of his games. To go from those older titles where it really felt like every line, no matter how ludicrous, had layers of meaning or conveyed unique humour, to something like Death Stranding, where we're having to endure multiple dry, lengthy explanations as to what a safe room is, or Hartman droning on and on about chirality and his heart and the shape of his heart and why his heart is the way it is. It all just seems like it's designed to show off cool tech now. The fact that Kojima could get his film buddies involved. I mean, his latest trailer is literally just a tech reel with spooky sounds under it. Oh, and also, Udo Kier is there, I guess. Further, these moves seem to back up long-discussed theories about the extent to which the identity of these games that we have grown so attached to may have actually emerged from translation or localization teams, who would apparently go on to have less and less control over each subsequent project, as even they speculate Kojima didn't like people tinkering with his darlings, and the less people he had around him to massage that initial text, to advise him on it, it would presumably follow, the more unwieldy his dialogue becomes. And haven't you heard? According to Del Toro, Kojima is the master. You don't question the master. Look, Kojima has long maintained a life in the spotlight within an industry that typically places even its biggest names pretty firmly in the background. It's just that with his focus shifting towards the movie industry, where people have less of an understanding of the medium he came from, the resultant vague, somewhat confused but effusive praise is nonetheless so unquestioning that it's beginning to resemble a cult of personality. I don't know, I will always be excited to play a new Kojima project. It seems like the dude is having the time of his life, and honestly, fair play to him. You produce that many industry-defining games, you certainly do not need to listen to dafties like me telling you you're apparently doing something wrong. Plus, he is clearly still capable of saying some truly profound things. I guess I just see moves being made in terms of the man's creative trajectory that suggest a growing distance from those who would understand and help him get the most out of his unique ideas. fans, in favour of those who tell him he's a god simply because they don't have a Scooby what it is they're seeing. In short, it feels like he's moving away from what made his truly incredible work so special to so many. And I can only hope, almost certainly vainly, that his upcoming projects redress that balance a bit. That I don't have to squint past quite so much Hollywood nonsense in order to get to those ideas that I can truly respect and, dare I say, love. Thank you all so much for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, all that daft YouTube stuff. It really helps the channel and it means the world. A massive thanks as well to my patrons, who you can see on screen and are all getting access to exclusive, fully produced videos that aren't available here. Your continued support is what allows me to keep going with the work I do on this channel, and I seriously cannot express how grateful I am for that. You are all the best. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Artyom Vitsyuk, Michael Tritt, Alex O'Sullivan, Rickety Cricket, Cameron Siniceros, Don McLean, Urban Cheese, Mason Miller, Brendan Hess, Charles J. Liu, Alistair Dunn, Vitautis Catharsis, Dolly Bowman, Young Condor, David Karstens, Tom Webster, Danis Sikauskis, Jordan Midler, Christopher Faherty, Nicholas Villeneuve, Yogesh Deshpande, Joe Lanzone, Leah Chinello, Captain Knusprich, Dylan Robinson, Bryce Snyder, C-Page Melt Limited, David Björk, Newen Palacios, Timothy Jones, Carr Christensen, Matthew Grover, Shardfire, Lynn Browning, Dallas Keane, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you all so much for watching, stay safe, and I will see you all next time.